Hello, welcome to today's episode of Code with Kweku. So in our previous tutorial, we talked about, the basic foundation of web development using HTML. And in today's tutorial, we're going to talk about CSS. So CSS is cascading style sheet, which is used to style the web. So for example, if you want to build a house, you use the raw blocks to build the structure of the building, and when you are done, you paint the building. So when we want to apply that ideology here, then that means we use HTML to build the foundation of websites. Then we use CSS as a tool to paint it or to beautify it. So basically, CSS is used to, beautify, a website or a web application. Okay. So there are different types of CSS and how you can implement it in your project. So we have the inline CSS, which is written in between tags or written inside opening HTML tags. Then we have the internal CSS, which is created on a different file, then linked to our pages. Then we also have we have the internal CSS is rather written in between the head tag of an HTML document. Then the external CSS is rather written on an external file and is linked to our HTML pages. Each of the different types has its own advantage and disadvantage. Okay, so we'll quickly talk about the structure of a CSS file. So basically, the structure of a CSS file is like this. We have the selector itself, then inside curly brackets, we have the property and the value. So for example, if you want to apply color to a text, color is the property, then the value, let's assume you want to apply red to a text, then red becomes the value. So that is how CSS is written. Okay. Then we have selectors. So there are different ways to, create selectors in CSS. So we can use the basic elements in HTML, such as the body, the head, the primary, image, table, forms. These are traditional elements in HTML which you can call to style. So in this example, you see that the p tag is called and is styled to a color of blue. Then we have class selectors. So class selectors is whereby you give an element a specific name or a class attribute which you can call to style later on. So in this example, a class name of highlight was given to an element and it's called here, and a background color is applied to it. So in calling classes, you use the period, then the class name. So it's dot, then the class name. Then we have ID selectors. So ID selectors are also, a way of assigning IDs to elements. And one thing is, you can't use the same ID for different elements, unlike class. With class, you can apply the same class name to different elements. But with ID, it's always unique to an element. When we get practical, we will talk about them, so don't worry. So this is how you call an ID. You use the hash sign, then the name of the ID. Okay. Then we also have the attribute selector. So in this instance, assuming you are creating a form and you want to style only the input types that are text, you can just call them like this. So input, then into square brackets, type equal to text. So in this case, any input which is not text will not be styled. Okay. Then we also have pseudo classes and pseudo elements. So pseudo elements are based on their state or position in a document. So for example, if you create links using the anchor tag, you can add the pseudo class hover. So in this instance, what we're trying to say is that when you hover over an anchor tag, the color should be red. So basically, this is just a pseudo class. There are different types of pseudo classes. We have hover, we have visited, a lot of them. Then also we have p first line. So in this instance, you are calling the first line in the p character, in the p tag, sorry. Then you apply font weight to it. So enough of the talking, let's get practical here. So first of all, I'll go to my HTML file. So we have an HTML structure like this, and I'll create a heading tag. So I'll create an h1 tag. I call it, this is a cascading style page. Okay, so we looked at ways to create or to insert CSS. So let's look at how we can create inline CSS first. So assuming I want to apply a color of red, but before that, let me save this and run it in the browser and see what we get. So in the browser, this is what we get. So assuming I want to start this from, or give this a color of red, I can just use an inline kind of styling. So style is equal to, then I call the color red, then I save. So now let me run the page again, and this is what we get. So basically, this is just a common way of applying an inline styling to an element. Okay, so I want us to implement an internal kind of styling. So to do that, you just create a style opening and closing tag inside the head element or head tag. So you have to note this very well. Internal CSS goes inside the head of an HTML file. Okay, so here, assuming we have another, let's say we have a p tag which says I am applying a color of teal to my paragraph using internal CSS style type. Okay, so what I can do is I can just call the element p, or element or selector, any of them is correct. Then I just give it a color of, let's say, teal. Right, so this is how we write an internal CSS. So I'll save the file, Ctrl S, then go into the browser and refresh. So this is what we get. I think the teal color is not visible, so I'll change it to, let's say, red. Yeah, so red, and save, go back, refresh. Right, so this is the second method of applying CSS. So let's say I have more. Okay, I want to give the body of the page a color. So how do I do that? Using an external CSS style. So I just come into my folder. I can create a new folder called CSS. Then inside the folder, I create a file called style.css. So the extension of a CSS file is .css. Okay, so inside this, I can now style my background. So I can just call the body then into curly brackets I just give it a background color of, let's say, a background color of black. Okay, let me save, go to the page and refresh. Okay, no, I've not linked this. So this is an external page and it needs to be linked to the page, so I need to link it. So with external CSS too, if you want to link it to an HTML page, you have to use the link tag. Okay, so this is how we create the link tag. Then you call the link to the style sheet. So it's CSS inside the folder CSS. Then you call the file style sheet. Okay, you can call this type is equal to I think we have text. Yeah, I think we have text, then /CSS. Well, if you bring it or you don't bring it, it will still work. Right, so I'll save this, go back to the page and refresh. Right, so now we have a black background. So basically these are the three ways that you can insert CSS into your web application. So the first way was to use an inline styling, then we used an internal styling, then now we used an external styling method. So these are basically the three ways. But then we have we have rules that govern how each of them work. So assuming that we want the P in the style, in the internal style, we want the P to be red, but we decide to apply an inline style and make the P, let's say we want to make it let's say yellow. Right, so let's refresh the page and see. So you see, in this case the inline element has taken precedence. But if you don't want the inline styling to take over the original internal style, you can add the keyword important. So important means this should be treated very important. So in that case the color will still be red. Right, so that is how you can control precedence in terms of using internal or external CSS. The same applies to inline and internal or external CSS. So assuming I come here and I want the P to be green, in effect it will not turn green because it's taking precedence from here. So if I want the external CSS to take precedence, then all that I need to do is I have to add the important to this. Okay, so now let me refresh. Yes, so we have red. So basically that is how you can use important to control how elements are styled. Right, so now we'll talk more about CSS, but this time around I want us to be using the internal method of styling. Right, so now I want to talk about selectors. So with selectors we can have a P tag or elements, the traditional elements. We can use the traditional elements as selectors. So in our previous example we use the body element, the P element and the H1 element. Okay, then there is also a universal element or a universal selector which is called star. So assuming by default certain browsers apply a certain form of styling to HTML pages. So you see, let's go back to our page. You see that at least there is some space here. So assuming I don't want that space, I can use the universal this thing selector to create. Then I'll call, let's say, padding to, we want 0 pixel. Then let's say border, we don't want any border. So this will reset the page to, a default state. So by this, you see, we don't have any borders or margins or paddings around our text. So in effect, Chrome applied an auto styling to our HTML file. That is borders, padding, and also margins. But if we want to reset it, because you see, if you don't do that, browsers will have different ways of applying styling to your page, HTML page. So for consistency's sake, you can reset it with the universal selector, which is star, so that you get a consistent styling, a consistent initial styling until you apply your own styling. Okay, so now I want to talk about classes. So now we know of the basic elements can be used as selectors. Then also we can apply classes as selectors. So I'll create another paragraph. So let's say I have h4. No, I'll create another element, which is h4. Then inside the h4, I will have this is a class selector. So I don't want the black color. I will disable the black color. So I'll just comment on this so that the background color is not black. Okay. So I have this element. This is a class selector, but we want to implement a class selection. So how do I do that? I just call the class attribute and give it any name that I want. So I'll call this first class. So this is a custom name that you give to any element, and so it can be any name. Let me put it that way. When I'm done, I can call it in my style using the period, if you can remember. Then we style it. So I want to apply, let's say, background color of, let's say, blue to the text. Then I want the color to be white. So I want a white on a blue background, right? Okay. So this is hex code for color. Actually, it's triple F. It's 6 Fs. But if you make it 3 Fs, it will work. So now let me refresh the page and see what we have. So you see, I've applied a background color and a 4 color to the text using or by calling the class. So this is how you can use classes in styling. You just give the element a class name inside the opening tag, then you call the class name with a period, then you style it according to however you want. So assuming I want to also increase the font size, I can give it a font size of, let's say, 20 pixels. I go back to the page and refresh, and this is what we get. Okay, so now I'll talk about IDs. So IDs, I'll just make a copy of this and change this to ID. So ID equal to, let's say, first ID. It can be any name. Okay, then I come here. So ID uses the hash sign. Then I give it, let's say, a background of, let's say, red, then a color of white, and I give it a font size of, let's say, 30. Okay, so now let me refresh the page. Right, this is what we have. The font size is, it should be 30 pixel. I didn't bring the pixel. Okay, so this is what we have. So basically, this is how we can use classes and IDs for our elements. Then we talked about pseudo elements. So assuming I have a link, let's say I have an anchor tag, then the link is, let's say, visit Google. Right, so I can just call A, then colon, then hover. So by this, what I mean is whenever I hover over the link, the color should be, let's say, red. All right, I think I have to create bricks. Okay, right. Okay, so now you see when I hover, I use the mouse, or I point the mouse on the visit link, I get what? It turns to red. So this is a pseudo class. So that is how pseudo classes work. When you hover over, you get what? Yes, as simple as that. Right, then we also talked about the fact that we can use, what was it? We talked about, let me check from the notes, attributes, using attributes. So I'll just make a copy of this, come back here, put it inside the head, then I'll create a form. So the form will be, so I create a form, then I'll have an input of, let's say, text, then I also have an input of email. Right, so I'll call this name and I'll call this email. Right, I'll create a brick and save. So now when I refresh, you see, let me break here once again, then I'll break this further. Okay, right, so now this is what we have. So you see the styling was applied to only the text attribute. So let's say I want the border colors to be red. Red is more visible, that's why I like using red. Okay, so now you see it applies to only this. So that is how you can also use attributes to style, to style form elements. Okay, right, so now I want us to talk about some common values, properties and values that we can use in CSS. Even though we've already talked about some of them. So the first one was color. So color basically gives a color to elements. So you see the text, we used color for the text, or the P tag, we used red. So this applies a red color to text or fonts. Okay, then we also have font size, font style. So you can see from here that I applied a font size of 30 and this increased the font size to what? 30. Okay, so I will create, let me just comment all these. No, I'll not comment them. Okay, so I just want to comment some of them. Right, then I'll leave the first one. So now the first one was H1. So H1, I'll not use the inline styling method. So I will use H1. Then I think, let me just get rid of these. Right. Okay. All right. So we have font color. We have font size. Then we have font family. Okay. So color, sorry, this is color, not font. So color, we can give it a color of, let's say, red. Then we give it a font size of, let's say, 40 pixels. Then we give it a font family of, so family, we can have different families. That is the font style. Let me put it that way, the font style. So we can have Arial, we can have sans serif. So by this, all that we are saying is when the browser doesn't have the Arial, it should fall on sans serif. Then we also even have the Helvetica or Verdana. Let me put Verdana. I'll just save this and refresh the browser. Right, so now we have this as the font style. So it picked the first style, Arial. Then the font size 40, font color red. Okay. Then we also have the text transformation. So all these are applicable to texts. So you see, when you type text, VS Code gives you different things that you can do to a text. So I'll choose text transformation. So text transformation, you can choose capitalize to convert all the text to capital letters. No, this will capitalize each first word. Then we have I think we have upper case, which will convert all of them to upper cases. Okay. Then we have lowercase, which will convert all the text to lower cases. Right. So this is how you can use the text transformation to do that. So I think I'll leave it at capitalize. I didn't save the file. Okay. Then we also have text alignment. So text align, center. So center will place the text in the middle. Right. Then text align. So you see, when you type text align, VS Code gives you what? All the alignments that you can apply to the text. So we have center, which will put it at the center. Justify will justify it. Left will put it at the left. Right will also push the text to the right. Just like in Microsoft Word, where you can use alignments to align text. So I'll keep it at the center. Right. So these are some of the properties or some of the styling that we can do to text in HTML. Then also we have let me uncheck this. I want to okay, I'll cut this and put it up here. Okay, so now let's see what we have. Right, we have Google and it's underlined. Every link by default is blue and it's also underlined. So we can style it by using what? So text decoration, we will say none. We don't want any underline. Right. We can also push it to the center. We can apply all these to it and it will work. So I'll just make copy and paste. Right. Then we can push it to the center. Text align center. It didn't work. But we can use margin auto. Okay. Then we can also change the color from blue, which is the default color. So assuming we want to change the color, we can also do that. Okay, so basically you can use styling to change even a link text. Right, so the next thing that I want to talk about is margins. So margin, I want to create let me use the form for this example. So I'll cut the form and bring it up here. I'll create 2 breaks. Right. So then I'll also create a button. So type submit. Then the name is also what? Submit. Okay. So now we have a form and a button. Right. So I want to create, assuming we didn't use the break tag or the break element. This is how the forms will be. Okay, you let me use 1 break. I want it to fall to, okay, yeah, like this. Then I also, even though without the break we can still style it, but that's not what we are talking about. So I'll just use the break for now. Later we will talk about proper styling of forms. So what I'll do next is I'll give the form a class of, let's say, form input. Right, then I'll do same for this one, so that whatever styling that I apply, it applies to both. So as I said, we are going to talk about margins. So how do we apply margins? So we just call the margin, and with margin we have you can write it as a single line, or you can use margin top, margin bottom, left, right, and so on and so forth. So assuming that I want to create a margin between the first, the name and the email, I can use margin bottom. So what do we, how many pixels? Let's say we want 20 pixels space, or 50 pixel space between the name input and the email input. So this is what we have. I think it's too wide. So let's say I want 10 pixels. Yes. So you see it has created a margin. So margin is, a space in between 2 elements. Okay. And with this too, I want to create a label for this. Yes. Then I also add the class label. So if you can remember, I said in a previous video that you can use you can give class names to multiple elements, but you can't do so with IDs. So by default, we've created these labels and it has applied the margin of 10 pixels. If we want it to go down, let me use break for now. Okay, so this is how it will look. Right. Okay, so now that we've created labels for the inputs, I want to apply label colors to our work. So I'll call this blue. Right. So now this creates what? A label color of blue. Okay. Then we also have what? A space at the bottom of our input field. Okay. So now let's type inside the form. The next thing that I want us to talk about is padding. So padding is the space within an element. So when you take the input field, for instance, the space within the input field is the padding. So assuming I want to create an input, so I can still call the class name, or I can add it here. So padding of, let's say we want a padding of 50 pixels. Let's see what happens. Okay. Right. Oh, this is too huge. So let's say we want 5 pixels. So this creates or increases the space inside the element. But let's assume that we have borders around our form. So let's say we have, actually our next topic is about borders. So borders, you can create borders around your element. So I want to create a border around the forms. So border, I'll use 2 pixels as the size. Then I want to use solid. Then let's say I'll use red. So this creates a 2 pixel or a 2 pixel weight borderline, which is solid and the color is red. So this is what we get. So you see the input fields is very close to the left side and the top and bottom of the padding. So we can apply padding because it's within the box. So padding, as I said, you can use a single line of code, or you can call padding top, left and right. So padding, I can say, let's say 10 pixels to the left, 10 pixels to the top, 10 pixels to the bottom, and 10 pixels to the right. So let's see what happens. Okay, so now you see that there is space. We've created spaces around the input field. So padding normally refers to spaces within an element. Then borders creates borders around or box around, elements. So solid, it can be dashed. So dashed will create a dash or dashes around an element. Then we have, so there are different types. You can just use any of them, either solid or dashed or even dotted. I think we also have dotted, which will create dotted lines. Right. Okay, so I'll revert back to solid. Okay. So now I want to talk about border radius. So what border radius does is, border radius creates radius around elements. So I will still use our input field. So I'll come back here. Then I'll create a border radius of, let's say, 50 pixels. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so this is how we can get a rounded input field by using border radius. Very simple. Then with border radius too, this is just a single line of code or a shorthand, but we can write, let's say if we want the border radius to be just at the left, I think we have this 0 pixel, 0 pixel, 0 pixel. So by this we want to apply it to just maybe 1 or 2 sides. So you see it applies to only one side. Then we can add, no, let me make it 10 pixel, 10 pixel. Right, so this will also add to, you see, the top left and bottom right. Then we can do, if we want it on only the top, we can do that. So we have the top left and top right. We can also do it at only the buttons. So we can do here. Then we get rid of this. So this puts it at the bottom. So basically this is how we can use radius, border radius to manipulate our input fields. If we want it all around 10 pixel, 10 pixel, we can just write a shorthand for it and it will work. Okay, right. So basically that is how we can create, border radius around our element. But I think 50 pixels is fine. Then I want the width to be, let's say, 500 pixels. Okay, right. Then also I want it to have a box shadow. So what I'll do is I'll do border. So border is, we can do border none. That means we don't want any borders around. Yes, so the borders are gone, but I'd rather use box shadow. So box shadow creates a shadow around. So I'll do -5 pixel, -5 pixel. Then I'll call a color of, so a color of FE, FE, FE. Let's see what happens. The box shadow didn't show. No, it's white. I don't want white. So I'll use, let's say 777. Okay. Right, so this is what we have. But we can manipulate the pixels. So I think I'll go for one here. I'll go for another one. So this, let me make it positive. So let's see what we have. Okay, so it applies to the bottom. Then I'll add another 1 pixel. So let's refresh and see. This is what we get. I think I want the top to be 2. Top, yeah, there's the top. Then I want this to be 1. Okay, right. So we can just manipulate it to see how it behaves, or to suit what we want. Okay, so this gives us what? Box shadows around our. We can even use Okay, so this is how we can create box shadows around our forms or even cards. So let's say maybe I have this card. So div, I'll create a div without anything. Then I give it a class of, let's say, box. I'll call it box. Okay, so what I'll do is I want to style box. So I'll give it a width of, let's say, a width of 250 pixels. 250 is small, 450. Then margin left. So margin left of, let's say, 100 pixels. Then I'll give it, I'll just make a copy of this. So border radius of this, and I'll give it a box shadow of this. Okay, so let's see the output. It's down here. Let me give it, let me break it. Okay, but then I have to give it borders. So border, I give it a border of, let's say, 1 pixel. Did I call it well? A class of box. Then I give it a height of another 450 pixel. So I'll not even need a border. Okay, right, so this creates something like this. 450 is too huge. Let me make it 300. I'll also make here 300. Okay, so I get something like this. The border radius is too much. Let me make it just 10. Then the color, this color can be manipulated, you know. Just push this up a bit. Control save. I refresh it. Right, so we have something like this. So basically you can just use styling to style a lot of stuff on CSS. So this is how we can use, basic CSS to style our elements. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next tutorial. And please, if today is your first time, please consider subscribing so that we grow this channel together. And if you've already subscribed, please consider clicking on the share button and also the bell icon, so that when new videos are loaded, you get notification on it. Thanks once again, and see you in the next tutorial.